but I definitely no. I think I wore it to an open mic as well, where you were in attendance. So yeah, you have seen it before. You just may not have noticed. So anyway, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Tell Me Where I'm Going Wrong. This is a podcast where two exes who are good friends get together once a week and talk about whatever is on their minds. And I realise I have to now somehow segue from talking about us in the third person to talking in the first person. So I'm Josh, I'm one of the hosts, and the other host is Sean. How are you, Sean?
I'm good, thanks. A little bit worn out because I just did a massive walk a long way from one part of London to another part of London. But apart from that, I'm okay because even though it's chilly today, there was a lot of blue sky. And
Yeah. I mean,
I get different vibes when it's blue sky and sunny.
But, you know, to start us off with the weather, as we often like to do, I think it was quite mild today.
Mild.
You know, especially
That's
when
such a funny word, such a funny English word or a UK word to use.
Mild, temperate. I think when you can get a nice spot somewhere, you know, in the sun on a day like this, it doesn't feel so bad. Because what is it? It's now like just gone 3. And by the time we finish recording this, it's going to be almost dark outside, which is very, very depressing to me.
Yeah, I mean, if I've got a big window next to me, so over the course of this hour, I think you'll be able to notice how the natural light disappears and my ring light takes over. So it's very dramatic how quickly it gets dark in the afternoon here.
Yeah, I know. I've been moving my plants around because of the changing weather. So I've got this one here, which is maybe a bit. I need to clip it back, but I don't want to clip it. I don't want to cut it back because at the moment, can you see all these flowers?
Yes.
So at the moment, if you're listening to this, not watching it, I've got oh God, hang on, what's it called? Acanthus. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the Latin name correctly or not, but sometimes called the lipstick plant. It's like a trailing plant, and it's got these lovely, like, red flowers at the bottom. So I don't want to cut it back while it's flowering. It would be such a shame. Did I give you a cutting of that? I can't remember.
Don't know.
I can't remember. Loads.
As a plant aficionado, would you be able to say if you have a favorite plant out of all the plants in existence? Do you have a favorite?
No, it's really, really hard. But what is really interesting, and I've talked about this when I used to work in the plant nursery. I used to talk about this with my colleagues a lot, is that there are just some plants which I'm drawn to and other ones which I have absolutely no interest in at all. And
there are other plants that disgust you.
Yeah, I mean, disgust is a strong word, but there are some plants which I wouldn't piss on if they were on fire. No, what was that alleged quote from Betty Davis about Joan Crawford? I wouldn't piss on you if you were on fire or something like that.
Well, what's that other one?
What's the line from Cecil B. Demented?
Yeah, I wouldn't suck your lousy dick if I was suffocating and there was oxygen in your balls.
Yeah, that's right. Which character was that? Alicia Witt's character?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so good.
Anyway, so yeah, no, I couldn't choose a favorite plant. I've definitely got favorite groups of plants that I'm drawn to and I enjoy growing and collecting. But there are some which I have absolutely no interest in. Do you have any? Because you don't hate plants, but you wouldn't say you're like a plant person.
No, I'm like not anti-plants, but I really like seeing those certain types of plants. I suppose I get a buzz out of them when I see them. I really like, are they hollyhocks? Those flowers, English flowers. You see them in English gardens for a limited time of the year. And they grow very tall. And I just think they're really pretty. I think I like those. But then I also love a sort of desert garden, anything like agave or cactus style garden. I love that. That really appeals to me. But I do like plants. I like seeing plants, but I'm not, I wouldn't be able to say, my top 5 or something. I mean, would you have a top 5 or a top 10?
Yeah, I mean, top 5. genera, as in like groups of plants to get a bit technical. But like palms, I really, really am drawn to palms.
Yeah.
Passion flowers, uh, hibiscus a little bit, figs, ficus, um, arid stuff, and amaryllis. But I should probably stop there, otherwise I'll just keep going.
There are certain things that I obviously feel a sense of I can't say the word, familiarity with, that remind me of where I grew up, or the flora in Australia.
Hmm.
So things like frangipani,
Oh yeah,
there are a lot of frangipani trees and jacaranda trees
yeah.
in and poinsettia, is that what you call
Poinsettia.
poinsettia? Those sorts of sort of tropical trees and flowers
Mm.
really remind me of Brisbane in Australia and growing up. And
Even
uh,
funnily enough, none of those are native to
no,
Australia. But
no,
yeah.
and also we used to have a lot of hibiscus in Australia as well. And where are
Mm.
they from? Are they from Hawaii or?
Well, the ones that you would grow in Brisbane would be, oh, I don't know. I think they're from Southeast Asia, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong.
Okay. And then, of course, in Brisbane, lots of things, or Queensland, lots of things grow really well. And mango trees, I just get used to seeing them, things like that, or avocado trees growing big. And uh, I don't know. But yeah, I really like frangipanis. I think they're
Hmm.
very sweet.
Hmm.
And they remind me of being a child. Not that they were always happy memories, but I
Hmm.
think there was a frangipani tree in the front yard of my nana's house, my grandmother's
Mm.
house, and I wasn't particularly close to her, but it's just a memory I have of being young and liking that tree. And when I was young, I used to like climbing trees. I suppose a lot of young kids like that. What do you think the attraction is when you're young, the desire to climb a tree?
I wonder, and this is coming from somebody who's not a biologist or a scientist in any shape or form. Well, I suppose I'm a horticulturalist. Anyway,
You can lead a
I
horticulture.
but you can't make her think.
Hmm.
Um, but I suspect that it's like a sort of DNA memory, which I don't even know if that's a real thing. But I think we are descended from apes that used to live in trees, and I wonder whether there is a very human instinct in us um, to want to climb trees. And also, I think, when you're young, when you're particularly in your teenage years, you're always trying to push yourself into new situations. And you have, what's the, you have, you don't have a fully developed
Frontal lobe.
frontal lobe or something like that. Is it whatever it is that, makes you assess risk? I think teenagers, particularly, I don't know, this is anecdotal, but particularly I think teenage boys, I've heard, um, are much more prone to sort of risk taking because their frontal lobe develops more slowly.
Yeah,
So,
I used to really love climbing things. Even when I became sort of an older teenager and I would go out drinking, I
hmm.
loved climbing.
Oh, that reminds me.
What's that?
Well, I just went to Sainsbury's on the way here. You could keep telling your story, and I'll just.
Oh. Well, I loved climbing things, and I would like break into buildings and climb on top of buildings, climb. Well, now I can't concentrate because you're making
Sorry,
crinkly noises.
sorry.
What is this?
I'll tell you in a minute. Tell us your
Oh, that's the
story.
end of my story. I liked
Oh,
climbing
okay.
things.
Well,
The
so I
end.
was okay. The end. That's the podcast. Thanks, folks. Bye. No, I was in Sainsbury's on the way back home to record the podcast, and I just saw this sticky toffee rum liqueur, and it was on special for £10 if you had a Sainsbury's Nectar card. So I thought I would just for research purposes only, of course, for the podcast, try it live on air, even though this isn't going out
Can you
live, but
hold
you
it
know
up
what I
so
mean.
anyone watching on YouTube can
It's
see
quite
that?
a it's quite a sort of Christmassy looking bottle,
Right.
and it just comes with this little label tied around, so it make a nice present. It would look nice in a little drinks cabinet situation, and it's probably going to be like sickly sweet, but I'm not
Well,
sure.
are
Is
you
it?
gonna do you mix it with anything, or are you
I
meant
was
to just
just,
sip it?
I think, just sip it. I mean, you could, if it's like a toffee flavored rum, you could make a nice little like
Milkshake?
liqueur milkshake thing. Yeah, exactly. So I'm
A
just gonna.
and,
Oh,
well,
it smells lovely.
drinking is your only vice, sir.
It is my only vice. So I'm just gonna pour a modest uh, glass of toffee flavored rum. It's labeled vegan, of course. Sainsbury's are really good about that. That's something we didn't talk about much in our Paris episode last week. When we were in Paris, trying to find vegan wine was a challenge. Um, because in England, we're spoiled everywhere. All the supermarkets label which wines, which alcohol is suitable for vegans. In Paris, that didn't seem to be a thing at all.
No,
So
nobody
had to
give a
go to
shit.
several supermarkets. Anyway, here's my little sample
Well, take a sip. I
glass.
wanna know take a sip. I wanna know what I mean, I don't drink alcohol anymore, so, um,
Mm. Oh, it's lovely. Oh,
give
it's
us
lovely. Oh, it's
give some
gorgeous.
feedback about
It tastes
hints of notes and
like, what was that brand? I can't think of it. It's a brand of chocolate that you get in the supermarket in the UK, vegan chocolates with like a caramel, gooey caramel filling inside. Like,
like Moo Free or something, or
no, and had like a yellowy, goldy yellow and brown plastic. Anyway,
oh, no,
it
I don't know.
tastes very syrupy, very caramel toffee. I mean, it barely tastes alcoholic. I didn't even check.
How alcoholic is it?
That's how alcoholic are you?
Oh, we know the
Uh,
answer to that soon.
See,
I
it's
mean,
my only vice. It's 20%, so it's not that
so
high.
you have to drink twice as much, Sue.
Yeah.
And
I'll tell you, it's a sticky toffee, dark and stormy is the official name. Oh no, sorry, that's a recipe. Sorry. Oh yeah, okay. So it's got recipes. So a dark and stormy, an affogato, and an espresso martini. Anyway, oh, and
well,
it's got comes with a little gift tag to and from. So if you wanted to
why
gift
don't
it to
you write
somebody,
a note to yourself? Dear Josh, as this is your only vice, please enjoy this on me. Love, Josh.
a tempting blend of Caribbean rum. Do you say Caribbean or Caribbean?
Caribbean, I said.
Caribbean rum and sweet toffee, creating a smooth, velvety finish. There we go. Um,
Well, talking about alcoholism,
mhm.
I'm in the middle of, well, not near in the middle, towards the end of listening to an episode of not Tell Me Where I'm Going Wrong. That's what, fucking hell.
That's us, Sue.
I've had it up to here.
You're on autopilot, Sue.
I'm actually quite tired, I think. What the fuck is going on with
Oh,
Mark
right.
Steele?
Hmm.
And he's interviewing Marcus Brigstock, who is a comedian who I had not heard of before. And he's telling stories about how he was from quite a wealthy family, but he was sent to boarding schools from a very young age, and it was
In the UK?
yeah, very violent and horrible, and he got mistreated and in violent situations with other students, other boarders,
Hmm.
and he became an alcoholic when he was 14,
Wow.
and he was in rehab when he was 17. So he
Wow.
said he's never had a legal drink in his life
God.
because he was a recovering alcoholic when he was 17.
Yeah.
And I just found that wild because I think, well, I always seem to identify with these people who've had messed up childhoods, but I would have been classed an alcoholic probably when I was 14,
Yeah.
going out to nightclubs and drinking like, bottles of vodka or bottles of Midori or by myself in one night. And it was wild. And what's interesting about Marcus and his story is that he also developed a compulsive eating as a form of coping,
Ah, okay.
self-medicating, and he's struggled with his weight, and it's very interesting. But he comes from a very different sort of life than me. That he came from an extremely wealthy family,
Hmm.
and I came from a not wealthy family, and but it's just so interesting how these problems are so universal
Mm,
for people from different walks of life. Although having money does, and he talks about this in the podcast, it does affords you privilege or opportunity to try different things or rise above things.
mm,
And what's interesting is he's quite progressive and left leaning for a rich person. And he said that he thinks having that hardship and going into rehab at 17 was the thing that sort of broke that circuit of that pipeline to being like a rich Tory asshole, privately
mm,
educated kid, because he got involved with so many different people from different walks of life, and he started to see how unjust the world was. But he
mm.
said if that hadn't happened to him, he maybe ended up like every other Boris Johnson wannabe. So
Yeah,
I find that interesting. Have you been
yeah.
listening to that podcast?
No, I did listen to one, maybe two episodes, um, but no, I haven't subscribed to it or anything like that. It makes me think. You said he developed a compulsive eating thing. I wonder if there is a, excuse me. I wonder if there is a need, or if there's a biological underlying reason why people do have behaviors like alcoholism or compulsive eating. I wonder if it's to do with dopamine release, or because remember I was saying, I mean, this is a while back on the podcast, I was saying I didn't drink alcohol for a couple of years. I stopped, and then when I started taking, when I started taking the Manjaro, I suddenly got an overwhelming desire to drink again. And most people, or most, anecdotal literature, or a also known as Reddit threads, um, says that Manjaro tends to curb people's appetite for alcohol. But I found it to be the complete opposite, and I wonder if it was because it suppressed my appetite and I wasn't eating as much. I then needed some sort of dopamine release. I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? I wonder where I get mine from now because obviously I used to drink a lot and I used to compulsively eat, and then I went on Manjaro and I stopped doing that. And I still think my brain needs this, but I don't know where I'm meant to be getting it from. So I do practice a lot of procrastination,
I thought you were going to say
and
mindfulness.
no, fuck that.
Because
I
you're no longer on the Manjaro, are you?
know, and so I feel hungry all the time again now, and but I find myself replacing behaviors such as drinking or overeating with repetitive like games on my phone or
Mm.
watching certain
Well,
things
that's
or
dopamine release. Yeah.
yeah. And so that's what I find myself doing. Otherwise, yeah, I would have just been eating or drinking in the past.
Mm.
Um,
I
but
think this rum would make a lovely, like, yeah, if you got some nice, barista oat milk, and mixed it with this rum, and I don't know, maybe a dash of coffee or something, I think it would make a lovely, creamy, like a Bailey's style drink.
do you ever think that you would stop drinking again completely? Or are you
Mm.
back in your drinking era now?
My showgirl era.
Yeah.
Um, at this point in time, I don't think I would want to stop drinking. No. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't. I, I've had a complicated relationship with drugs in the past. I wouldn't say I've ever been like a full blown addict, but I've certainly been dependent on different drugs over the years. And I don't take any drugs anymore except prescription drugs. Um, and I mean, alcohol, of course, is a drug. I kind of resent the legal framework, which kind of separates the risks of alcohol from the risks of other drugs, because I think
Yeah.
alcohol is probably one of the most dangerous drugs. It just so happens to be legal in most of the world.
Yeah.
Um, but because I don't do any, non-prescription drugs anymore, I do kind of feel like I do need to have one single vice, Sue, and that for me is alcohol at the moment. Now that the Manjaro's kind of steering me away from food as much, perhaps. I mean, I'd love. Well, I would say I would love, but it would be interesting if I could be one of those people who became, addicted to exercise and got my dopamine that way. And but I don't think that's ever going to happen. I mean, I'm 49, turning 50 next year, and I think if that hasn't hit by now, if that hasn't, happened by
Well,
now,
you do go for long walks multiple times a week, right?
yeah, 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 like
I
long,
think
like
that's a
4 hour
form of that.
walks.
That's quite meditative, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that, those long walks are just it's therapy for me to be in nature in inverted commas. And the reason I say that is because I want to talk about a book in a minute called The End of Nature. But
Oh, okay.
um,
How does alcohol these days, how does it affect your mood or your equilibrium or your mental well-being? Like, does it impact you in any way to drink? Does it make you feel better?
yeah, yeah, like it's whether it's real or imagined, I do almost feel like a sort of, what you would imagine a dopamine release would feel like. I do feel cozy, rewarded,
Yeah.
warm, happy, etc. When I have a little sip of something, and when I say that out loud, that sounds a bit ridiculous, but I don't know, like it does, and I think I know the dangers of alcohol. I don't think I'm at risk of becoming an alcoholic, um, but I think everything has got to be sort of balanced, and I just think if that's the only sort of vice that I have now, it's not that bad. It's not like I'm drinking every day. It's not like, I'm
So
drinking
how
huge
at the
amounts.
moment, how often do you drink?
Um, I would say like some weeks I might not have a drink, but other weeks I might have 2 nights where I drink, especially, it's December now, it's the beginning of December, and there's a lot of social stuff coming up. So this week I'm out Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, and I'll probably drink all 3 nights. But,
Yeah.
that's not a typical week for me. Like, some weeks I don't have any social engagements and I don't drink. But yeah,
Yeah.
this is the festive period.
It's interesting for me because I've spoken about this on the podcast before, but I didn't ever really class myself as an alcoholic.
Mm.
Looking back, I suppose I was in some form because when
Well, yeah.
I mean, I drank from when I was a teenager and I would drink until oblivion. Like, I
Mm,
would not just have a beer, I would drink a box of wine, or I would drink 2 bottles of wine, or I would drink a bottle of vodka in a night as a 14-year-old right up until I stopped drinking. Like, that's
mm,
how I drank. I didn't drink all the time. I could
mm,
sometimes go even a couple of months without drinking if it didn't arise,
mm.
but every time I did drink, I drank till I was blackout drunk. And how do you classify alcoholism? If that's not alcoholism, what is?
Yeah, and I don't know if there exists proper definition of it, but to me, I think there is a fine line between alcohol dependence or alcohol abuse and alcoholism. Like
Yeah.
alcoholism would be somebody that just, even though they want to, they cannot stop drinking,
Yeah.
like
And I
any
and I
other.
suppose I suppose mine was then alcohol abuse,
Mm,
and that I would never have 1 or 2 drinks, I would have 12 pints and or 2 bottles of wine, and I would pass out drunk and just having to make that decision to stop was based on the fact that I couldn't have a drink and it just be 1 drink.
mm,
So, it was easier for me because I wasn't an alcoholic to just make that decision,
mm,
but, I really feel for people. I mean, maybe it's not seen the same, but that's how I feel with food,
mm,
is it would be like I can be mindful about food and give up certain things for a while, but the desire to eat it without the Manjaro, the desire to eat it is there all the time. Like, I think
mm,
about it all the time. And so
mm.
for somebody living like that with alcohol or other types of drugs, it's just so debilitating, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. To just walk down the street and be thinking, about alcohol, to be
Yeah, like
thinking I want to drink.
I see you drinking that, and I don't give a shit. Like, I'm like, "Whatever." But if you lifted up like a big cream cake or a lemon meringue pie
Well, it
and
just so happens. No, I'm joking.
I would feel extreme jealousy, and I would feel a pang of, like, "I need to eat that cake."
Mm,
That's how I'd feel. The Manjaro, when I was on it, really stopped a lot of those cravings,
mm,
but now that I'm off it, I'm back full tilt boogie. I'm back at this, like, "Oh my god, I just wanna eat everything," you know?
mm,
And
mm,
it's really an exercise of extreme moderation and self-control to
mm.
try and just live in the moment and try and not fucking eat everything.
Yeah.
Even if
Uh,
I'm, like, having a portion of food that's somewhat nutritious and healthy,
mm,
I have to make sure that I just don't eat too much of it.
yeah.
And that's the
Yeah.
portion control is the biggest issue for me.
And do you find, like I find at this time of year, when it's dark by sort of 4:30 in the afternoon, do you find there is a desire to eat more or to eat different types of foods?
Yeah, like I want to eat. I walked past a street food vendor before. I forget what they were called, but they're a vegan food trader. They're often on Brick Lane, and then they're near Shoreditch High Street Station, just
Hmm.
around near Box Park.
Okay.
And I stopped because I saw him, and I said, "Oh, are you completely vegan?" This store. He said, "Yes," and it's called. I don't know how you pronounce it. It's OSU.
Oh, the coconut guy, the
Yeah,
pancakes. Yeah,
yeah. He
OSU
did the
coconuts.
Yeah, but now
Yeah.
he does all these other things. But I mean, it stands for overstand us, paying attention to the detail. I don't know. It's a
He
little bit,
was he was in Camden Market for ages.
yeah, yeah. So, but they had this, like, the food is quite nutritious. Like, he's got like hot bowls and loaded fries, but
Mm.
I I had already eaten lunch when I was walking past him, and I stopped to chat and say hello, and I saw the fully loaded fries,
Mhm.
and I, like how I used to be and how I still feel, but I'm trying to be different. Is oh, I'll just get that because I'm here.
Mm.
Like, I'm here. I don't want to miss the opportunity to try that. It looks really nice. But I'd
Yeah.
just eaten like a pasty, like a vegan pasty at Mandala Cafe, and I was just like, no, it doesn't make sense to eat that. I've eaten enough calories.
Mm.
And so I have to, it's like this process of like coaching myself or guiding
Mm.
myself through life where I have to talk myself down off the ledge all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm
I
constantly just counting, like seeing what's coming into my body. Like, I
I
have to always think about it.
I feel like that with certain tasks. Like I'm really loath to do anything to do with money, like bank accounts, taxes, stuff like that.
Yep.
Like it's like pulling teeth, and that because I don't have a partner, and I'm kind of I'm responsible. I mean, if I had a partner, I would still be responsible for myself, obviously. But there's no one there to kind of nag me or remind me or prompt me or encourage me, and so like I have to do these like ridiculous mental acrobatics to like trick myself into doing it, like, and once I'm doing it, it's the getting started is the hard part. Once I'm doing it, it's not that bad. I always,
Yeah.
of course, build it up to be much worse in my head than it actually is. But I have to like trick myself, and I have to like, like stick notes to the fridge and stick notes to the, to the laptop and stuff, like to be like, just do 5 minutes of it, like that. I don't feel any sense of reward for doing it. And
I'm such a struggle bus kind of person. I don't actually like that term. I'm gonna not say struggle bus. I don't like that. I think it's quite ableist. Um,
yeah, yeah, because it kind
I
of it refers to the sort of the the slow bus as it was nicknamed, right? Like the is that right?
Yeah, like transportation for special needs students.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I I get so worked up about it that if I left myself notes or a list, that would stress me. I would
Mm,
then be stressed by seeing that all the time because I would still procrastinate and not do it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well,
and
but
what's
we
this?
all
What's
need.
this?
So
What's this book you're going to
this
tell me?
book, I can't remember who or where I heard about this book, but it was interesting because I was this is a nonfiction book, and I have also started reading another book, which I think I mentioned on the podcast before. I definitely have mentioned the author Barbara Kingsolver,
Hmm.
but I was reading one of her books called Flight Behavior, which is
Yeah.
fiction. But I'd also at the same time, because I've I don't know about you, but I read like different books simultaneously. Um, and I started reading this one just a couple of weeks beforehand, and I didn't realize until I got to the end of Flight Behavior that she references Bill McKibben in the references for her novel. But anyway, Bill McKibben's an American author, and this book, it was not the easiest book to read. It was published in the 70s, I think, or maybe very early 80s. And I,
What sort of genre would you call it?
um, well, it's about human relationship with nature, and he kind of argues that nature is a human construct. Like the natural world that we think we interact with bears absolutely no resemblance to nature because humans have um, essentially destroyed nature in every single corner of the planet. That there
Yeah.
is no such thing as the natural world. Um,
Yeah.
and he kind of at one point he says that can we consider because humans obviously are part of the natural world and human societies are part of the natural world just as any other animal society is part of the natural world, but he questions whether we can consider any human actions to be within the natural world because they're created by humans who are part of the natural world.
But that seems quite a, I don't know, a strange take on nature, because what about when you go to the toilet? Is that not a natural process?
It is, but it's
Or if you vomit
where does that
from,
waste be? But where does that waste go?
I
That's the
know, but
problem. Like,
isn't the biological act happening, regardless of what happens to it once it's outside your body, isn't that
hmm,
a natural process?
yeah, it is. But he's talking more about like our understanding of nature. Um, and I wouldn't say it's a great book. It's an interesting book. It's obviously a bit outdated now. He talks about facts and figures and he talks about, the current era as if it's, in the far off
What's this
future.
dude's name?
Bill McKibben. But there were a few things, particularly in that the last chapter which I finished last weekend, which really kind of when you read something or you are exposed to a piece of information and it really you feel like a sort of almost like a paradigm shift within yourself. You
Yeah.
feel a seismic kind of, and I felt very kind of like overwhelmed and wasn't sure quite what we're supposed to do with feelings like that or knowledge like that. But I mean, one of the things which I've written down, one of the quotes from the book, which I thought was interesting, is he ends talking. It's a critique of capitalism and human society, basically.
Sorry, can I just go back? I thought you said this was written in the 70s.
Yeah, I think maybe it was 80s actually. I'm just trying
Yeah,
to
I think it's late 80s. It's 1989.
really
Yeah.
let me have a look.
Yeah,
Eight.
because I'm
Oh
just
yeah,
reading.
sorry, 89.
He
Yeah,
was
you're right.
born in 1960, so I'm like, that's
Sorry, yeah,
weird that he would have written a book in the 70s.
89. Oh, okay, it's more recent than I thought. Although, well,
Yeah.
still 35 years old, but um, yeah, probably actually not that recent at all, is it? But yeah, one of the sort of tangential critiques is that of capitalism and that how
Yeah.
capitalism is so intrinsically tied to the destruction of the natural world. And he says, we have accepted that accumulation of wealth and resources is what we want. We have
Yeah.
wills, credit cards, legal frameworks which uphold our rights to own objects and beings. And it really made me just sort of think about, you know, all these things that we take for granted, or these assumptions that we have about society, about a right to this, a right to that, a legal framework around which we build things like, ownership and
Mhm.
rights. Um, they're all constructs, and it is
Yes.
very startling to kind of peel back the veil a little bit and just kind of look at what's behind that. But he argues as well, and I don't know. This is a little problematic. Well, depending on your point of view, I think this is a little problematic. But he argues, or he suggests in the last couple of chapters that for a long time, post-industrial revolution, the world was propelled forwards, and capitalism in particular was propelled forwards by its dependence on the slave trade and
Yep.
the enslavement of people, and that, of course, has changed over the time, and there are still people today. I mean, slavery still exists today, but not in the
Yep.
same way that it did, 100, 150 years ago. And he believes, or he kind of argues, I suppose, that we swapped around the time that, the abolition, can't say it, abolition, can't speak today. I wonder if it's to do with that alcohol I've just consumed. The abolition of slavery also
Um,
coincided, I mean, from a North American perspective, I suppose, coincided with a much greater dependence on fossil fuels. And that has fucked up the planet
but I
immeasurably.
also think, I don't know if he talks about this in that book, so I haven't read it, but I also think that when people moved away, when societies moved away from what we consider traditional slavery, I mean, if
Mm,
there is such a thing, it's such a weird term to use.
yeah,
They just capitalism found a way to morph subjugation of people into different ways.
yeah.
So, relying on offshoring the slavery,
Hmm.
so it's like the civilized world doesn't have to see the slavery happening. So
Hmm.
even today, like a lot of the technology we're using now was built by people who are either in difficult situations or getting paid next to nothing, or for want of a better word, are working as slaves.
Yeah.
And and that's
And
to do with food
who
production.
are almost, completely overwhelmingly black and brown people. It's not
Yeah.
white people. It's not Caucasian people.
Well, and just to see a really startling example of that, you and I went to see a film last week
Hmm.
called Homebound, and it's a film that was loosely based on a true story about two young men who were friends who were working in factories in India to, send money home to their families, and they were caught up in the struggle of migration of workers, like city workers and factories workers in India, having to try and get back to their families
Hmm.
during the COVID um, emergency, and seeing how people live and work, how it's shown and portrayed in this movie, is exactly what we're talking about here. It's people living in poverty,
Hmm.
but getting work that is, it helps them a little bit, but the work also impacts their health and their well-being so much that they can't really do anything else. There's no social mobility.
Hmm.
And so that's how we live now. In the past, we would have had people like that in our lives, in our societies,
Yeah.
working for us for next to nothing. Now it happens, it's invisibilized, it's behind a
Hmm.
curtain in
Hmm.
another country. I
Hmm.
mean, that film, it was so distressing to me. I mean, I cried through most of it. And it was really amazing to have the two young actors who were well, I say young. I mean, I think one of them is in his 30s, but I'm such an old man now.
Young to
And to
us.
have the director and writer of the film there as well.
Hmm.
It was it was really special. If anybody wants to watch this film, it's on Netflix at the moment. I think all around the world, but it just showed us how, like, I don't know how you can talk about your reaction to it, but to me, it really just showed me how we use people as as cogs in the machine
Mhm.
of capitalism and modern forms of slavery
Mhm.
to create cheap fabrics, cheap food, cheap technology.
Yeah.
I found it quite depressing. Not in a way like poor woe is me, like I'm so depressed. I found it very confronting, I suppose I
Yeah.
want to say. What
Yeah.
did you think of that movie?
I loved it. I thought it was really beautifully shot, beautifully made film, a really touching story. Very sad. If you're going to watch it, prepare. You know, have a box of tissues handy. It's very sad. But yeah, it really. It, I came away feeling embarrassed about my privilege in the world.
Yeah.
And the director said that has been a lot of, he's had a lot of people come up to him, particularly in, first world nations or developed nations like, the UK, in Europe, in the US, and Canada, where people do say, it really puts, shines a light on our privilege, and how we have so many choices in our lives compared to other people in the world. And yes, these are fictional characters, but I think there's elements of truth in that. Yeah, like you said, like these people have no social mobility. They are not presented with options. There's the sister in that film, the character of the sister who really wanted to go to college and just does not have the opportunity to. She, they can only send one, or they can only afford to have one of their children not work, and that's the boy, so he gets to go to college. Um, it 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 moved me, it made me think and reflect a lot. And there was a beautiful metaphor in the film as well, where he talks about the cricket ball, and he said the cricket ball is only alive when it's in the air. And I think about that metaphor a lot. It was really beautiful, a beautiful film, so do watch it. um, but yeah, this Bill McKibben book, it does sort of say that we as humans, we outsource the effort in things. We want food on our tables. We want,
Mhm.
um, you know, fucking toffee, sticky toffee rum in our glasses. And, but we don't want to have to go out and, you know, fucking build our houses and grow the food and grow the sugar cane and distill it and make we want. And so for a long time humans outsourced that, through the slave trade, more so in North America, but I mean we had slavery in the UK as well. It wasn't unique to the US. um
But also a lot of the slavery that benefited the UK was offshored.
yeah,
So there were people working on plantations and,
yeah,
uh, I mean we just talked about that film from India. I mean, look what Britain did to India.
yeah,
How many
yeah,
tens of millions of people died because of what Britain did to India?
yeah. Well, the entire British colonial empire, I mean, it was all exploiting people and places and lands around the world for our benefit, and
Yeah.
we reaped the benefits of that, and we lived on the burden of other nations and other people. But um, he kind of argues that as that became less acceptable perhaps in modern societies, we then ramped up our dependence on fossil fuels, and so we became so dependent on oil, for generating electricity and for running cars and stuff, that we have expanded well beyond our means. And now we've we've destroyed every last square foot on the planet is
Yeah.
damaged in some way from its original state, particularly because of fossil fuel dependence. And it's
I think,
yeah.
like, one just caveat to that, that I think maybe you're giving humanity a little bit too much credit as well by saying as slavery became less acceptable,
Mm,
we moved. I think it's because it's just cheaper to use fossil fuels. You're not you're not worried about, like, corporations don't give a shit. Like, I think they would have just gone, well, people die or get sick and then we have to replace them
mm,
with motors that can just have fuel put back in them, we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
true.
that's the main drive. I
Yeah,
think it's a profit,
yeah,
not about looking
yeah.
after anybody.
But yeah, it sort of as an extension of that, what I thought was interesting was that, like, he talks about towards the end of slavery, before the Jim Crow era, so before slavery was actually abolished in the
Yeah,
US, he said that there was I don't know if he actually cited any sources, but so this could just be his argument or his take on it. But he said that there was quite widespread, even in the South, there was widespread opposition to slavery, but people didn't want to give up their their way of life, their standard of living. So even
yeah,
though he said, and again, I don't know if he does cite a source, but he said that the majority of people, even in the South, were opposed to slavery, but still voted to keep it because they couldn't imagine another way of life. They were so attached to the benefits that slavery brought to them. And he makes quite a close analogy of that being the climate crisis at the moment, that everybody
yeah,
knows that our way of life is completely unsustainable, and
yeah,
90% of what we do every day is contributing to complete climate catastrophe and breakdown. It's contributing to whole nations being submerged under rising sea levels. It's contributing
yeah,
to, you know, millions or billions of people around the world dying from climate extremes, or if not dying, then having their lives severely impacted. And yet we don't really do anything about it, and neither do politicians. They make the most meek and mild arguments, because to do anything other than that would be political suicide, for lack of a
yeah.
better term. And yeah, that I found quite depressing.
I I watched a documentary the other day. I mean, this is pivoting slightly, but I watched a documentary the other day. There used to be a current affairs program in the UK called 40 Minutes. Do you
Mm,
remember this? It was a series of shows, I think, on the BBC, and they were kind of
vaguely,
like standalone storytelling, sort of investigative journalism. I suppose similar to what Panorama is.
yeah.
And
Or
I
60
watched an
Minutes in
episode.
the US, right?
Yeah, but they were more
Or is that Australia?
documentaries. Well, it's both. There's
Okay.
an Australian version as well. But it was more sort of documentaries, because 60 Minutes was often somebody sat in front of a presenter in front of a
Mm,
camera
mm,
talking, and then they would show the segment, and then the person would lead in and out of the segments. This was like a documentary style, um, concept.
mhm,
And I watched an episode the other day called Rent Boys, and it was about young male sex workers in Birmingham and Manchester in 1984. And I highly recommend you watch it. It's
yeah.
staggering, but a lot of the a lot of the driving reasons why these young men were being coerced or pushed towards sex work to make money is because of the huge unemployment there was because of Thatcherism and
Mm,
all of the um, the hyper industrialization and shutting down mines and I think there was something like 11% unemployment or something at the time. It was like the highest it had ever been, and a lot of
mm,
these young men were just had no, like, it was go to the job center and get money, like, from the government, and then that wasn't enough to live on. And it is staggering, this documentary. It's kind of done in a sort of long lens, so filming young men getting in and out of cars, but then interviewing them. Some of them are on camera, some of them are like hidden faces.
mm,
And it just, I just think this is a similar theme here, what we're talking about, how the vulnerable people or people who are on the bottom of the pile end up wearing the burden or, suffering the brunt of what we want. Because the rich people in the UK at the time, in Britain at that time, wanted to get richer, and it was that
mm,
hyper capitalism rolling in, and it was at the expense of these working class and poor people who were then
mm,
forced to go and do things that they didn't want to do or wasn't good for their well-being.
mm.
And And it just goes on all around the world, doesn't it? Like, this is how, people,
But
poor people live.
but this is so endemic to human civilization now that we exploit. Like it's I don't know, is it I think it's in our nature. It's in our nature to exploit. If we can see a way of doing something that requires less effort, and maybe it is, going back to our ancestral DNA memory or whatever, like we were talking about at the beginning. Like maybe it's to do with that. That it's built into our DNA to try and get a reward for the least effort or output possible because we're trying to conserve energy for survival. To fight off fucking saber-toothed tigers or whatever it was that we were fighting off. When we were Neanderthals, or is that so built into our DNA that we will always find a way of exploiting something or someone in order to get to get the reward. Which
Yeah,
is, you look skeptical, but like
yeah, I
we
think that's a it's not an excuse. You're just telling what you think might be a reason, but we have logic and we have privilege. We can
yeah, but
reason.
we apply that very selectively.
Yeah,
You
but
know,
I
like we
think
could
we
say
could do better.
we could say, I mean, this is a really frivolous example, but we could say, okay, let's only ever record the podcast during daylight hours, so we don't have to use that extra electricity to power this ring light that's now, like, you know blinding me. But we don't. So yes, we can apply logic, and I could say, oh well, it's okay because I get my electricity from ecotricity, so it's sustainable. But it's still using electricity. It's there is still, and that's just such a silly, you know, little
Yeah,
example of
but
that.
there's
But I
also
think,
there's levels to this, isn't there? Like somebody being coerced into sex work as a minor because all of the government's policies have made their towns and families too poor to support their livelihood, even
mhm,
like their basic necessities of life, is very different to us using light bulbs. Um,
it is, but well,
and let's
Is
not
it
forget
though?
the
Is it
lesson.
though?
Let's not forget the lessons of Belinda Carlisle. That if you're going to be out of the room for more than 30 seconds, less than
Hmm.
30 seconds, leave the light on.
But is it like? And I'm not. This isn't aimed at you. But as an example, you're flying to Australia on Thursday. You don't need to do that. I'm flying to. I haven't booked my ticket yet, but I'm flying to the US next year to go to Dollywood. I don't need to do that. And so we don't see the destruction that causes, and we're probably, we know we're not idiots. We know that flying is really fucking bad for the planet, but we do it because we're not the ones that are going to be worst impacted by it. So we're just, we're sending the problem, down the chain, aren't
Yeah,
we?
but it's also it needs to be systemic change, not our individual choices that
Mm,
make these changes. If you and I didn't fly, these problems that we're talking about, whether those young men in India working in the fabric,
mm,
I went to say fabrica, the factory,
mm,
that would still exist. Or, if it was back in the 80s and we decided not to, I
mm,
don't know, support a company that was supported by Margaret Thatcher, those young men would have still been coerced into sex work in Birmingham.
mm.
So it needs to be systemic change, and placing um, the onus on individuals is part of the problem when we need to tackle corporations and government systems
But
instead of putting.
how do we do that in a democratic society where if a political candidate said, like Zach Polanski, for example, if he was to say, um, we're introducing a limit, you can only do one long haul flight every, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years.
Yeah, but that's once
That
again putting that on individuals.
Yeah, but
There are
how else do we curtail human behavior?
okay, there are so many places to start other than with yours and my flight. Like there are so many places to start. There are companies and corporations in the UK dumping waste into oceans and rivers, unbridled, like unchecked, right? So there are like taxation laws that the money that from companies and churches that don't pay their taxes would help solve a lot of these problems and help like carbon offset and rebuild nature. So there's so much the subsidizing of dairy and meat industries by the government. Instead of doing that, steered money into things that are better for the environment and food production that's better for the environment. There's so much that can be done on a systemic level that
Mm.
doesn't place the blame on individuals to start with. And then once you have that, it starts to shift the culture of society or the planet, and things are then put in place that help us make better choices. We're here living in a hellscape and being blamed for um, you know, visiting our families in other countries, when really these corporations that pay next to no tax, or they offshore their tax or their bank accounts so they don't have to pay money, at places like Amazon and Tesco,
Mm.
and paying people like minimum wage, if that, and factories in Asia working young people like for next to a few pennies or pounds a day. All of
Mm.
that is going on, and then the messaging of the mainstream press is, "Hey, you're not doing enough. You're not." The same happens
Okay.
with housing and stuff for young people.
Yeah, but okay, you're talking about it from a like what's the word? Like a punishment or a blame framework that, it's not
Yeah,
the individuals, but I'm talking more about from an ethical or moral viewpoint. Like, when I made the decision to buy this £10 bottle of sticky toffee rum from Sainsbury's,
yeah.
like I didn't even think about it. I don't know if I thought about it subconsciously or not, but consciously, I didn't even think about, oh, maybe I could forego that £10 bottle of rum and, just fucking send my money somewhere else in the world. Like from a moral or an ethical framework, how
Well,
is it
that's
arguable? Yeah, but let me finish. Let me finish. But how is it arguable that we have such privilege in our lives while we know that everything comes at a cost, and we know that there are people that are being exploited and there are people going without while we are fucking, and I'm not saying that I have an answer to that conundrum, but
yeah,
it really made me, it gave me pause to,
like paws up, little monsters.
uh-huh, yeah, pause up. So yeah,
I I still think you're looking at it from an individualistic approach when you talk about that bottle. What what needs to happen is, if you want a drink, you can go and buy a product that hasn't had slave labor in the production process, that hasn't been damaging, that the
I
shop that
don't,
you buy it
I don't
from,
know that
the
though, do
work.
I? Like,
No, but that's what yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It's not your responsibility alone. You can't make those decisions alone unless you plant a fucking sugarcane field in your back garden in Brentford and you harvest and make your own sugar and make your own rum. You
yeah,
can't do that. So you need to rely on the systems that we all live within to be better and to do better. And you can be part of that change by campaigning, electing people that don't hate poor people or want to change things for the better for the environment. But
mm,
you can't wear the responsibility of that on your own. You can make your own private moral ethical choices, and you're a vegan, or you don't do certain things, or we just bought tickets to that trans fundraiser. you know you can do things like that, but you can't not you can't be expected not to buy a bottle of rum that brings you some joy in life. You can't,
according
you not
to
buying that is
according
not
to
going to.
what though, that's the thing. Like, yeah, I'm not talking about like about me trying to create systemic global change through my actions. I'm just talking
Yeah,
about peace of mind. I'm talking about
well,
how,
that's
you
up
know
to you. Yeah.
yeah, and
Do you do
that's
you have a problem with buying that?
in the moment, no, but like when I stop and I think and I look around, Although I can't see anything now because it's gotten dark outside and it's just this fucking bright ring light illuminating my face, burning my retinas. But um, you know, I think I make my peace with it because it's comfortable for me to make my peace with it. You know, if I stopped and I thought about it, I would. I don't know what I would do. Like, you know, and this is, you know, not to advocate for this at all, but you know, like we are so destructive in our very existence, um, that I do sometimes think the world would be better off without humans in it. You know, um,
But, you know, I do believe in, say, boycotts, because collectively you're sharing the responsibility to enact change or to force change. You're
mm,
not one person just doing it for the hell of it. But that's fine as well. Like if somebody wants to make a personal call on what they will and won't do in their lives, that's
mm,
fine. But boycotting, like veganism as a form of boycotting, or us not going into Starbucks because of Israel, that makes change. You know, that
mm,
forces change. And so that's fine. But you've only got yourself to live with. So if you can live with yourself and making the choice to buy that bottle of rum after considering all of the ways that it might be problematic, nothing's going to happen in the world for you doing that. But
mm,
if there was a movement of people who refused to buy that rum from that supermarket for a series of reasons, such as like poor labor laws or not paying workers enough in the supermarket where you bought it, or the conditions of workers on fucking sugar farms, whatever it was,
yeah, yeah,
that's when collectively people could come together to change that. But in the meantime, you not buying it as an individual is not going to do anything unless you have a collective movement around that. And that's why, like like the boycott, divest, and sanction, is that what it stands for? BDS movement.
yeah. I
You
think
know,
so. Yeah.
that's why that's so powerful. Is it's because lots of people making that personal decision with their purchasing power, but doing it as a collective, and
Mm,
that's what changes it. So yeah, you can feel certain ways yourself about it, but unless you unless you team up with other like-minded people, it's not really going to make a difference.
mm,
And that's the thing, we shouldn't be blaming individuals for going and visiting their families or going on holiday. We should be looking at ways to make those forms of transport more equitable, more environmentally friendly, and collectively take
okay.
responsibility for it.
Can I play devil's advocate for a second then? Because
Are you gonna play the centrists, Sue?
no, I'm gonna say, but isn't that a welfarist argument as opposed to a abolishment argument? You know, when it comes to animal rights, that isn't that like saying, well, if people, you know, want to visit their families, blah blah blah. If people want to eat meat, then at least we should improve the living conditions for animals. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying
Yeah, but
I'm.
we live in a world where people are displaced and around the world, not just for their own enjoyment. There are people who are migrants for financial reasons, and they should have the right and the ability to go and visit their place of birth or their families and friends. So there are people who,
Even if
millions
that
of people who are
causes
displaced.
even if that causes destruction and um you know
Well,
impacts
that's
on
where
people.
I don't think it has to be black or white like that. It's like, well, we can look at ways of making these systems better. You know, we have technology, and that's why if people in government steered money into making these forms of transport more environmentally friendly, or made trains affordable, or do you know what I mean? Or changed things in those countries and changed things with capitalism, imperialism, that people didn't have to become financial migrants and refugees. So there are
Mm,
so many things going on. So if one person wants to go and visit their family in India and they're living in the UK for financial reasons because of what Britain did to India and destroyed its ability for its people to be financially secure and have social mobility, or even just the bare necessities of life,
mm.
they should still be allowed to go there. But us collectively should take responsibility of making that improving uh, improving the reasons why so they don't have to do that, and if they don't want to, and also that people can visit each other when they need to or want to.
So
It
how is that
we can't just
different? So how is that different from the way that people living in the South might have said, before slavery was abolished? How is that different to people saying, well, I don't think it's right that, slaves are treated the way that they are, but I don't want to have to cook my own meals. I don't want to have to plow my own fields. I don't want to have to make my own bed. Like, is there a difference between those
yes,
two
yeah,
arguments?
because yeah, yeah, because people were enslaved and slavery is wrong,
Hmm.
but traveling to visit your family
Yeah, but
with
if
the only means necessary, like there were alternatives to slavery. Do you know what I mean?
yes,
And so
yeah,
we
but
need to
if you
look
are
for
talking to somebody
we need
from,
better alternatives to air travel.
but if you're but if you're talking to somebody from the Solomon Islands who says, well, by, you know, by flying around the world, you are literally making my country and the land that I was born and raised on go underwater, and it's
Yeah, but
different. And I'm not,
your trip
mate.
to Dollywood isn't putting Samoa underwater, right? Like your trip to Dollywood isn't doing that. Collectively, the way that the world operates is doing that. So
Mm,
it needs to change on a systemic level.
mm,
And so you can be inside a system like we are now and campaign collectively for things to change while still operating that system. Like I have to go and shop in Tesco or Waitrose. There are things that those businesses do that are detrimental to the well-being of the planet and the people
mm,
on it and animals. But I can campaign and do actions like be a vegan, run vegan events. I can fight for workers' rights. I can stand up for like fucking business up against businesses that bring in like anti-trans bathroom laws, all of that. But I still have to use these things. And I live in a different country from some of the people that I love or I need to see. I'm going to go and visit them, but I can then still be an environmental activist and fight for changes to the systems that I need to use to get there. So
mm.
I think that it's really complex, and I don't think there is a right or a wrong. Otherwise, yeah, what are you going to do? We couldn't be making this podcast if we were going to say no to everything that was problematic. We wouldn't
Or
be able to do it.
anything that we deemed as non-essential in our lives. Um, yeah, like we wouldn't do half the things that we actually do. Um, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's. I don't know if I would recommend the book in and of itself. The book isn't that fantastic, but it did. The last couple of chapters definitely made me really sort of stop and question and think a lot about the the things that we, I don't know, that we just take for granted in society. The things that the values or the moral judgments that we accept as the norm. Um,
Yeah.
that maybe we should stop and question more often.
Well, of course. I mean, I think what we do on this podcast a lot, we talk about, tell me where I'm going wrong. What's the wrong and right way, or what way could things be done better or more
Mm,
compassionately?
mm,
But, like we talked about this big concert coming up next year at Wembley Arena called Transmission to raise money for a trans charity.
mm,
And there are a lot of the performers on that lineup who will be using air transport to get to this event. Now they're donating their time and their talents to perform at this, but that's the system we're in. And so, yeah, we also have to be fighting for better ways of moving people around the planet while we also fight and raise money for trans rights. And we also try and convince people to eat less animals and stop exploiting animals. And we need to do all of this at the same time.
mm.
There's not one, you can't really focus on single issues, can you? Like you have to look at
I
oppression
think I don't
and
know.
as one big
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, yes and no. Like, I think you do have to look at single issues, because looking at the entirety of all of human civilization's problems and inequities or injustices is overwhelming. So you kind of do have to,
I
like
know, but
vegan.
for instance, if you were going to go down that road of feeling guilty and making the choice not to have anything to do with air travel, you might not go to that concert where all like
Mm,
90% of the performers have been flown in for it,
mm,
right? So you'd start to you get tangled up in that. So it's hard to be a purist about something. Or me as a vegan, I might say I'm only going to shop in stores that don't sell any animal products at all. That would be extremely, extremely difficult for me, and I
mm.
think my quality of life would probably suffer because of it. And so we have
Well,
to,
and I
like,
suppose that's the
weave
crux
in
of it,
and
isn't
out.
it?
We have to weave these things together.
And that's the crux of it, isn't it? Like, I do think it's a balance between comfort and not comfort, even that's not even the right word, but like something that is going to impact. Because yeah, feasibly it would be possible to only buy from shops that didn't trade in animal products, but it would take a lot longer to do your weekly shop. You'd be fucking traipsing halfway around London. And it's about the sacrifice that we are and aren't willing to make, I suppose. Anyway, it's
Or are able to make. I
able to
mean,
make. Yeah.
like, we don't all have 10 hours a week to do grocery shopping.
No.
Also, if you're gonna do that and you needed to use trains and buses to do that, well,
Mm,
then you're contributing to the wear and tear on public infrastructure and
mm,
and carbon emissions of buses. So, you've got to weigh it up, right? And it's
mm.
once again, that's putting it all back on the individual instead of asking or demanding change at a higher structural level, which is
Systemic.
what we
Yeah.
should be doing.
Yeah.
Um, just, we could probably end now, but I
Yeah.
just want to read one little quote from that documentary I watched about Rent Boys. It was very poignant, very sad. Obviously, spoke to me a lot about these young men being in compromised situations. But towards the end of the documentary, the interviewer asked this one young man, "Are you happy with the way your life is? Do you feel happy, when you think about the work that you do?" And this young man said, "I can't say I feel happy, but then again, I'm not sad." And I
Mm,
just found that really heartbreaking that that's how, like, a lot of young people live in this sort of in between, not happy, not sad, of just doing what you can to get through.
mm, yeah, that is that is that's very poignant, as you said. We should wrap up
Yeah.
though. So thank you for joining us on this very chaotic discussion. But if you would like to leave us a comment, let us know your thoughts. Please do so wherever you're listening to or watching this episode. You can also subscribe, whichever platform you're using, and do share our podcast with others as well. And we will be back in your feeds this time next week. Sean will be joining us from Australia. And
I
yes,
forgot about that.
yeah. And we look forward to seeing you then. And thanks for joining us.
All right. Bye.
Bye.